Good evening and welcome to 16 by 9. We've had laws protecting workers' rights for decades, covering things like hours of work, minimum wage, and overtime pay. Experts, though, say we've become complacent, that workers' rights are now being trampled on every day. And as a joint investigation by 16 by 9 and the Toronto Star reveals, inadequate government enforcement means there's almost no chance employers who exploit their workers will get caught. Here's Robert Cribb.
Mohammed Umar Nassim came to Canada brimming with optimism for a better future. But it wasn't long till the cold reality of life in his new country hit home.
It made me really angry, depressed, weak. This was not Canada I thought it would be.
Umar says in his first job here, he was forced to work nearly every waking hour.
12 hours, 14 hours, they kept on changing. There was 16 hours too, but it was never 8 hours, and every day.
So you were working 100 hours a week?
More than that even, I think.
How is that even possible?
That's what everybody told me. I had to work there.
His story may seem hard to believe, but exploitation of workers has become something of a cottage industry in Canada. Workers who prepare our food, sell us gas, and wash our dishes are having their rights trampled every single day.
The erosions of rights that we're seeing are something that happen on quite a widespread basis, but the workers who are most vulnerable are workers who are in what we characterize as precarious employment. Work that is low paid, part-time, temporary agency work, migrant work, being asked to do excessive amounts of overtime, not being paid for overtime. It's resulting in real human suffering on a daily basis.
Over time, the labor laws that took decades for workers to win have been whittled away to the point where huge numbers of people are now vulnerable to exploitation.
Right now in Ontario, about 40% of jobs are non-standard, precarious forms of employment.
40%?
40%.
It's remarkable.
It is, and yet that is becoming the norm for many, many people in our society.
That underclass of vulnerable workers is growing, and even highly educated people are at risk. Umar earned a master's degree in automotive engineering from the University of Windsor in 2009. He got nearly perfect grades, literally the poster boy in the university's marketing materials.
My dream was one day I'm gonna be designing the cars and I'm gonna settle down in Canada. Just gonna live a happy life as everybody else seems to live.
It didn't work out that way for you.
Yes, at that time, automotive industry was facing a huge recession.
So he had to settle for whatever he could get.
I got a reference for a job at Petro-Canada.
Gas station?
Gas station, yes.
It's not exactly the dream.
No, it wasn't at all.
Right away, Umar says his new boss took advantage of his desperation for work and his lack of knowledge of Canadian labor laws.
Initial job interview, he specifically told me that you could not get overtime, but you would have to work longer hours. Your availability should be 24/7, and there is no overtime, nothing.
What was your level of knowledge about Canadian labor law?
Nothing. I knew nothing at all.
By law, an employee should be earning time and a half for working anything more than 8 hours a day. But Umar says he was working lots of overtime hours and was only paid his regular hourly wage of $9.50 an hour.
The way I took it is it's a company policy and nobody gets overtime. I did not know there is a law supporting that thing.
Umar went back to Pakistan after his one-year student work permit expired. His boss hired him back as a temporary foreign worker to be a manager in 2011 and gave him a raise. Umar says he was still working long hours, but as a manager now he wasn't being paid at all for anything more than 8 hours a day.
Averagely 14 to 15 hours. I was paid for only 8 hours. I was so confused and so tired. I worked like 200 plus hours and I see paycheck with 88 hours.
At some point, surely you must have understood that you're being exploited.
Yeah.
Why did you continue to stay there?
Because my work permit required me to work for Petro-Canada.
Umar was trapped because the temporary foreign worker program ties workers to one employer. And Umar says when he complained, his boss started making threats.
Several times he mentioned me that if you complained and Petro-Canada fired you, you could be deported.
They're not idle fears. They're frequently threatened with deportation if they complain about their rights. Often the response is that the worker is fired. So you can see how those restraints on their rights make it very difficult to resist unfair treatment when they face it.
Not all of Umar's colleagues at Petro-Canada were foreign workers, but Umar says his boss mostly hired newcomers to Canada. He says that's because his boss knew they'd be easy to control. His name was Shoaib Khan. Khan came from Pakistan too, so he was very familiar with the challenges faced by immigrants.
They need jobs and they don't know the laws, they don't know anything. They have a language problem too. Mr. Khan, he told me that due to my skin color and background, it was going to be almost impossible for me to get another job.
Finally, in 2014, Umar was granted permanent residency and didn't have to stay at Petro-Canada to stay in the country. So, he gathered up his courage and confronted his boss.
What's the point of coming to Canada? What's the point of having master's degrees and high grades and everything if this guy, he gonna keep exploiting me?
Umar wasn't deported, but he says he was fired.
I worked really hard for this guy. But what I realized, they are businessmen. They don't have, maybe they don't have heart, but they just care about money.
Next, backlash at work.
So you believe there was a threat of physical harm?
Yes, physical harm.
This is Shoaib Khan. He has managed to build a successful business, running 12 Petro-Canada franchises in the Greater Toronto area. But one of his former employees, Mohammed Umar Nassim, says it's all been built on exploiting vulnerable workers like him.
I thought Canada had laws, impartiality, fairness. I was surprised with this kind of behavior.
Umar claims Khan forced him to work more than 100 hours a week and didn't pay him for thousands of hours of overtime. So he got a lawyer.
I was appalled. It's basically, I mean, in another world, this would be called slavery.
Umar is suing for unpaid wages, wrongful dismissal, and damages totaling more than $1 million after he says he was fired in 2014.
Petro-Canada?
Hi, I'm trying to reach Mr. Khan.
Yes?
We wanted to ask Shoaib Khan about Umar's allegations, so the first thing we did was track him down on the phone at one of his Petro-Canada stations to arrange an interview.
As you know, Mr. Nassim has alleged that he worked, 100 hours a week for years and received no overtime pay. I mean, what do you say to them?
We are in a gas station business. People come out of car wash and they say, oh, when I entered, I had a Audi, and when I came out, it is a Hyundai. They can say whatever they want, right?
That didn't really answer our question. However, Khan did file a statement of defense in response to Umar's lawsuit. In it, Khan denies Umar worked overtime and says he wasn't even aware of any overtime claims. But Umar's lawyer says the evidence tells a different story.
Nassim was told that he was to send emails each time he started his shift and each time he ended his shift. So he had an email record of every shift that he worked and his hours in that regard. And on top of that, we have timesheets. So there is a ream of documents to support his claim.
We were hoping Khan would offer an explanation for that evidence, so we tried again.
So it's not true. You're saying it's not true.
No, I'm not saying it's true or no, but I'm saying that you said that he is saying, so I told that people can say anything, right?
Once again, Khan wasn't very forthcoming. But in his legal response, he insists he never required Umar to work 100 hours a week, and he never authorized that much overtime.
It was clear to Nassim throughout his employment that he was expected to be there the hours that he worked. There's even instances where Mr. Khan would call Nassim, he'd just gotten home from a 16-hour shift, and something had happened at one of the locations, and he would say, Nassim, you got to get back here, you need to deal with it.
Witten says Khan's defense is perplexing at times, suggesting the reason Umar was at the gas station so much was not to work, but rather to sleep.
The defense, some aspects of it are just frankly bizarre. It suggests that Nassim was just living virtually at the gas station because he didn't want to go home to a cramped apartment. He would prefer to sleep at the gas station.
Nobody likes to hang out at the gas station. What kind of place is that?
We wanted to make absolutely sure Khan had a fair chance to explain himself, so we kept trying to get him to sit down with us.
The thing that's most important here is that we make sure that you have an opportunity to speak in the story and have full opportunity to give your side of things.
I totally agree with you, and this is a very fair policy that, okay, like you want to hear both sides of story. But to comment on that, I need my lawyer, sir.
We did what Khan asked us and contacted his lawyer in hopes of finally getting an interview. But we ran into yet another roadblock.
I'm getting back in touch with you again about our request for an interview with your client.
Mr. Cribb, I've outlined my position and what we're prepared to do. We're not prepared to comment about what's in the litigation.
What's in the litigation, in fact, goes far beyond a dispute over working conditions. Umar says the story took a dark turn in November when he was contacted by one of Mr. Khan's business associates.
And he asked me, what if you were found dead at home? And that is the point I got scared and I just contacted the police.
So you believe there was a threat of physical harm?
Yes, physical harm.
We called the man Umar spoke with to hear his version of events.
I was trying to treat him as my brother. We tried to, resolve these matters by our own, right? And this is what I did.
Was there some concern about his safety if he filed a lawsuit?
If Mr. Khan has said anything to Omar, this is between them. Omar could be right, Omar could be wrong, I do not know. But if he says that I threatened him, he is wrong.
Shoaib Khan says he never threatened Umar and denies taking advantage of his immigration status. But faced with so many unanswered questions,
Mr. Khan,
we made one last attempt to get some answers.
I'll give you my card. Rob Cribb from the Toronto Star. We just want to talk to you about these allegations. It's really important that we get your side of the story, sir. Please. Can I give you my card at least? There's thousands of hours of unclaimed overtime. Can we just talk about it?
In the end, we got nowhere with Khan.
Can I just give you my card, sir?
Petro-Canada is not named in Umar's lawsuit, but we felt surely they would be concerned about how franchisees treat employees.
I mean, this was their brand, and to allow one of their franchisees to permit this practice, I mean, that really disturbs me.
Umar says Petro-Canada employees did conduct on-site inspections, but his complaints about working conditions were ignored.
I raised like, oh, we are not getting enough pay, there's lots of work and overtime. And he did not bother, he did not even listen. He said, you have to talk to Mr. Khan.
Petro-Canada ought to have known about this or done something about it.
Petro-Canada is owned by Calgary-based Suncor Energy. 16x9 contacted Suncor to ask about the allegations against Shoaib Khan, but our interview request was declined. They did send us an email claiming they monitor conditions at gas stations, but Witten doesn't believe Umar's complaint was taken seriously.
Their focus was more on whether he was keeping the coffee hot and whether the pumps were polished. And so in other words, they were either turning a blind eye to this practice or knew about it and just decided to do nothing about it.
Suncor says its franchisees are contractually obligated to follow labor laws. However, any investigations and/or resolutions remain between the Ministry of Labor, the retail licensee, and their employee.
After that, I said, these people, they just want us to work and make money for them, and that's it.
Next, nowhere to turn for help.
Kind of feeling like we are slaves, like he's a king. We can't go against him.
Wherever you are in Canada tonight, you can bet there are a lot of workers who are going to bed exhausted, discouraged, and feeling exploited. And the odds that government inspectors will come to the rescue and actually enforce the law are minuscule.
The chance of being subject to a proactive investigation is vanishingly small.
Even when an employer is caught breaking the law, they often get away with a slap on the wrist.
And I was like, how come this thing is going on in Canada?
Mohammed Umar Nassim says his boss, Shoaib Khan, forced him to work thousands of hours of overtime that he never got paid for, and threatened to fire him if he complained.
My life was whole Mr. Khan's business, Petro-Canada.
Mr. Khan runs 12 Petro-Canada gas station franchises. On February 13, 2013, his company was fined for violating the law covering statutory holiday pay. That illegal act resulted in nothing more than a $360 fine. And that very same day, Umar's timesheet shows he worked 16 hours, and he says he was only paid for 8, something Khan denies.
We were like kind of feeling like we are slaves, like he's a king. We can't go against him.
The problem is, most provinces rely almost completely on complaints from the very people being exploited.
The onus for enforcing lies overwhelmingly on the most vulnerable people in the system.
Which means it doesn't happen.
Which means it doesn't happen.
Take the case of Ontario, a province with nearly 450,000 employers and only 40 proactive enforcement officers. Those officers did a total of 2,477 unannounced inspections last year. At that rate, it would take them 181 years to inspect every employer. So it shouldn't be surprising that labor violations happen all the time.
When the government engages in proactive enforcement, what you see is they discover widespread noncompliance.
Lawyer Faye Faraday says the results of inspections in other provinces have been in line with the startling number of labor violations uncovered in Ontario.
Last year, Ontario Ministry of Labor did a blitz, precarious workplaces. 304 inspections, 232 non-compliant. Recovered over $361,000.
In the blitzes that they've done since 2012, the rate of non-compliance is between 70 and 80%. That's a serious problem.
Ontario's Minister of Labour, Kevin Flynn, is responsible for addressing that problem. So we put the question to him.
Nearly 80% of the workplaces they visited had some form of violation. That's extraordinary. Was that surprising to you?
It was surprising and disappointing at the same time. 80% isn't a tolerable number and shouldn't be tolerable for anybody in this province.
You have 40 proactive enforcement officers. Is that enough?
Is 40 people enough? You wonder. You really wonder some days if it is when you look at the size of the province. But I think we've got very well-trained inspectors, and we're hiring. We're hiring more.
Despite the efforts of those inspectors, Flynn admits labor violations are getting worse. So he's ordered a review of the enforcement system and promises major changes.
I don't have the interim report yet, but every so often I get a little glimpse of what they're hearing.
So there's reforms on the way?
There's reforms on the way. We're going to do it in a very thoughtful way.
Faye Faraday says it's about time the government showed it's serious about addressing the exploitation of workers.
It's a government choice of what kind of system do you want to create? What kind of society do you want to create? If employers know that there's no one looking over their shoulder, what's the incentive to comply?
Right now, there's very little threat to employers and a growing number of vulnerable employees. And that can be a dangerous combination.
I was so depressed and angry, and said, I called my parents, I called my friends. Okay, that is what happened to me. That is how things work in Toronto.
If you could speak directly to politicians or lawmakers who might be listening to this, what would you say?
I think they should do more inspection, directly talk to their employees and find out what's going on. Hopefully this will help and this will save other person going through the kind of abuse I went through.